introducing Jon Carroll, coming from Portugal, who is a good friend. And this panel originated actually from an Andy Fox discussion and another panel we had. And when I had dinner with Jon in Portugal, he said, I want to do a program, K-1 Hell. I want to do that program. So put together Gary and Dawn. Jon, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks, Phil. And thanks for hosting this webinar. And Phil is absolutely right. I listened to a couple of Phil's webinars, and in each of them, the issue around K-1s and the pain that single-family office executives and accounting teams suffer when when it's tax time and they get these K-1s. So we're going to spend some time today approaching the problem of K-1s, this K-1 hell, from a couple different perspectives. One is sort of the behavioral finance perspective and how to work with and explain to our principals the pain that we're suffering and why. And clearly and concisely. We're also going to take a look at some of the operational issues that surround the capture and processing and analysis of K-1s. And we're also going to spend some time then talking a little bit about the technology that is available in the marketplace to support single-family offices when they deal with K-1s. But before we get to that, and before I ask my panelists to introduce themselves for a second, why don't I just give you a minute on me? My background is, as Phil mentioned, I live in Lisbon, Portugal now. I basically retired at the end of 2021. Spent about almost 30 years working in the family office industry. I'm semi-retired. I'm working with a couple of single-family offices right now, and also with the Forge Group as a writer and a contributor to their premium report on based upon the Tech-NEW-logy survey that they did with 186 of their members. Right after college, went to work in banking, spent about 15 years doing that. Went to work in a family office and spent 7 years as a CFO, then a COO. Following the sale of that family office to a bank, it became Genspring. I went on my own and started a consulting firm called Family Office Metrics. I owned that and ran that for 15 years until 2015. At which time EY bought my practice and it became Family Office Advisory Services at EY, which is still ongoing, and spent 6 years there and then retired. So right now I'm an independent and enjoying life. So I'm really pleased to be joined today by two great professionals. Dawn, who is an maybe a recovering Big Four accounting partner, tax partner, and is now an executive in a very large and complex family office. And Gary, who I've known for many, many years, maybe even back into the 90s when he was a consultant working for a technology company that our family office was using, and Gary just has a wealth of knowledge about operations and technology. So, look, why are we talking about K-1 hell? Well, there's somewhere between 30 and 40 million K-1s issued every year. Obviously, as you all know, they usually arrive late and almost sometimes at the last minute. And it's they're complex. They're state and federal and even international, complications or information in the K-1s that needs to be dealt with. And further, when you are, as I expect almost probably all of you are, overseeing multi-tiered entities. That just adds a whole level of complexity to the capture, processing, and analysis and reporting of the K-1s. And finally, not the least of which is that K-1s can, be, I don't know, 10, 15 pages to 100 pages long, and tons of unstructured data, and just lots and lots of notes and footnotes and attachments and schedules and everything else that have to be understood in order to properly capture and report on that information. So that's what we're deeming to be K-1 hell. And as I said, I'm delighted to be joined by my panelists, Dawn and Gary. And I'll turn it over to Dawn, you now, and then followed by Gary. And then Gary, you flip it back to me, and we'll get this show on the road. But Dawn, please take a minute and tell us how you got to be where you are today.
Oh, thanks, Jon. Well, first of all, I want to say I think you're living my perfect life. You're my hero, living in Portugal, and I think that's where I'm hopefully headed.
It's a great country.
Oh gosh. Well, I'm super pleased to be here this morning. There are a lot of folks on this phone call with whom I've worked, and maybe I'll let that be the lead off to say that I was with Deloitte I was in my 24th year, I guess, in the private wealth practice in New York City. I was in that practice my entire tenure with Deloitte, and I loved it. It was a great place to have a career. I was lured away to work with a wonderful group of people. I wouldn't have done it if it weren't such a lovely opportunity. So I am also loving being in a completely different environment and facing a whole new array of activities that are taking up my time right now. But really, really happy to see all the folks on the call. Just how many of them I'm really pleased to be still interacting with. So hi to all of you.
Gary, thank you, Dawn. Gary, why don't you give us a couple of minutes on your background, what brought you to this place, and your deep and abiding interest in exploring K-1 hell.
All of the intersections that you and I have had are part of it.
Yeah.
I've been working for over 27 years in financial services, primarily in developing and leveraging portfolio and partnership accounting solutions, tax compliance, related software and such for family offices, all flavors of mutual funds and hedge funds and private equity and real estate and so forth, fiduciary trust, and did so working at software vendors, accounting firms, fund administrators serving those markets before more recently pursuing my own consulting practice. I'm familiar with the features and functionality of most of the portfolio and partnership accounting, investor relations, and so forth systems that you all probably use going back years. I won't date myself by naming some of the older ones. But again, for today, and this is where Jon first sought me out, it's my experience evaluating commercial scanning solutions and designing and developing document data capture solutions specifically for K-1s that brings me here today to address this. So looking forward to kicking this off, and back to you, Jon.
Thanks, Gary, and thanks, Dawn. So why don't we start with, kind of a big picture question. And really it's for both of you, and Dawn, we'll start with you, but you both have worked with many single family offices over the years, and just wondering what, I described some of the pain points, I think some of the issues that are presented by K-1s, just generally speaking, to the family office around tax time. So what do you see, and what have you seen as the major pain points of handling K-1s, and tax reporting? Dawn, why don't we start with you?
Sure. Well, I certainly have a long and varied, sometimes painful, sometimes you can manage the flow, but it's really a question, in my opinion, of volume and timing. And really the interplay between those two things and the associated risk factor that you are trying to manage from a a family office perspective. I think that's the the three things that are kind of hitting all at the same time. And unfortunately for folks who are in charge of whatever the title is for that person, people who are in charge or responsible for getting that information in the door and out to the accountants, and then back from the accountants and on to the people or the trusts or whoever, it's like being a funnel essentially. And the inflection point is at the family office.
So you mentioned, risk as one of those components, and so I'm always wonder, like, what's the balance between materiality and compliance, because I know that principals in family offices have perspective, right, on filing their tax returns, and don't always necessarily, although many do, of course, but many don't always understand the relationship between receiving K-1 on a partnership and then the impact it'll have on their personal return, and the timing and the importance of those numbers on those K-1s to the overall return. Can you maybe give us a little perspective on that, and how you've worked with your clients over the years on that sort of issue?
Well, let's face it. If there was no risk whatsoever, then we wouldn't. First of all, we wouldn't be talking here today, because the stakes would be so low that there wouldn't be a concern. But there is a concern because there are a couple of different kinds of risks out there. There's economic risk, that you get the math wrong, right? And you don't know the right amount of tax to pay. So that's an economic issue. There's the risk that you're going to end up under exam, and which is a different kind of economic risk, in my opinion. It's also potentially some reputational risk or other kinds of risk. And then the sort of the upheaval and consuming of professional time. Family offices obviously are working with constrained resources. So I think that kind of risk is also a problem. And then the compliance generally tends to be troublesome when we're working with incomplete information. And that's really where you end up when you're trying to get all the K-1s in the door, into the tax return, and out the door in a timely manner.
I mean, I know in my experience, I've worked with family offices where the principal has made a blanket statement: we will not file our returns late. We will file on time, and we don't want to have any extensions and that sort of thing. And that creates quite the dilemma, doesn't it, for the team that's responsible for pulling together the personal return. So I'm wondering, and obviously I believe you've had the same or a similar experience with your clients over the years, and what is the best way to address that sort of issue? And I guess maybe the underlying question is there any basis for that? I mean, should principals should they have a fear of filing late or on extension?
Well, I would say, maybe to back up to the beginning, before we even worry about what K-1s are coming in the door and when, I think that one of the basic questions is to really understand the risk tolerance profile of the person whose tax return you're talking about. And if the risk tolerance is high, then you have more options than if the risk tolerance is low and you want to have all the information in your hands. You want all that information accurately included in the return, and then you want that return filed on time, right? So the most constrained fact pattern is the most difficult to achieve. I think actually the risk of making errors is higher if you force all of those things to happen. Not impossible, But, you know, getting stuff in the door September 14th and getting a return out September 15th, I think the risk of mistakes is higher.
Yeah, so basically it depends upon the temperament, and as you I think you stated, the risk tolerance
Yeah,
of the principal, and so understand everybody's different, right? It's a spectrum.
that's right.
Um,
For the
so
tax preparers, you know,
yeah,
as long as they're happy to sign a tax return, I think then they're able to operate within a range of risk tolerance, right? So I try to explain it I used to try to explain it in terms of, this is where I think your risk lies if you file a tax return late. This is where I think your risk lies if you have incomplete information. And
mhm,
put it in very plain risk terms, coupled with an honest, if you can, an honest estimation of what the economic exposure is. I saw that Jack, by the way, hi Jack. I saw that Jack posted up something in the chat about filing on extension reduces risk of audit selection compared with timely filers. Absurd, but true. Quite possible. I actually think the IRS is kind of opaque about what their criteria are, and as their criteria changes. But I think that there are ways to mitigate the risk is maybe where I would think that the discussion really should go. And if you are, whatever your risk profile is,
mhm.
right, you have to operate within that bucket for that taxpayer, and give them the best possible outcome based on their risk tolerance.
Mhm. Yeah, well said. And I read Jack's point too. And let me just let everyone know that perfectly okay to post a comment or a question in the chat as we're moving along, because we're keeping an eye on it. And to the extent we can, we'll weave it into our dialogue or to our conversation here. But on that point, let's just stick on that for a second, because it may be true what Jack said, but there are also people who the perception is that, look, if I don't meet the deadlines, that means maybe I don't think the rules apply to me, or I just have heard horror stories, or it's the guys at the club told me this or that. So I think that there needs to be a certain level of empathy, I guess, maybe on the part of the team for the principal's point of view.
Right.
And I'm not sure how to really overcome that other than to make sure you can explain all the facts. I mean, does it come to pass sometimes, Dawn, when you are in receipt of some information that is not necessarily material to the outcome of the personal return, that you could just say, well, let's just estimate that and
Well,
then file the return with this special
for sure.
example, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the IRS actually contemplates that there are situations in which taxpayers don't have a complete data set. And there are ways to approach that mitigate tax exposure, or I guess penalty exposure. It's not tax exposure. You have to pay your tax regardless. But there are ways to avoid penalty exposure.
Mhm.
And that, I think it's actually very straightforward. You know, the IRS says if you don't have all of the information, and by the way, I'd love to see a show of hands, but maybe we'll talk about it in the questions of how many people have ever gotten a K-1 that arrived after September 15th. I'm going to raise both my hands because it's happened to me many times. So there are instances where it is literally impossible as a consumer of K-1s to follow with a complete set of data at the time of filing. That is one of the fact patterns that happens often. So the IRS provides that you can go with best available information.
Mhm.
They provide you the opportunity to amend I mean, I think that there's some mythology about whether or not amending is a good thing or a bad thing,
Yeah.
but that opportunity exists because it is understood that there are instances where you're not going to be able to file a correct and complete return on time.
Mhm.
And then there's also a way of attaching a form to your tax return that says, I am calling out as I'm filing my return that I don't have enough information in my hand right this minute to file accurately with respect to investment X. I'm going with an estimate. I'm going with the best available information, and I want to file on time. So I'm doing the right thing here, and I'm gonna attach that piece of paper to my return. And then if you do that, you avoid penalty. Once you get that K-1, I mean, John, you can't ever get out of paying the tax. So once you get that K-1, the income is, you now know what the taxable income is that's on the K-1,
Mhm.
and you have to do something to true up one way or another, either amending a return, or some people will true up on the following year tax return. Going back to risk tolerance, that's not something that the IRS is happy with. They really don't like that approach. But in the real world, that happens quite often. So, but if you file
But
that,
that would not be your preferred approach, though. You wouldn't recommend that necessarily if the other approach could be done.
not necessarily true, actually. I think
Oh,
that
okay.
it goes back to that risk tolerance. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's a risk factor.
Mm-hmm.
But if you've got the tolerance for doing so, I think it's a very viable method, as long as you raise your hand, file the 8082 and say, I don't have all the info right this minute. Not my fault. I can't do anything about it, but I'm going with an estimate. And I'll true it up at some point in the future. I have
Mm-hmm.
a long held belief that is a very viable method.
Great. Well, thanks for sharing all those, for sharing your perspective, Don. I really appreciate that. And I guess I'd like to turn now to Gary for a little bit of discussion, Gary, around, pain points and what you've seen, in the family office, especially from an operational perspective, technology, and what, tools and techniques that are either available or not available that create the pain, and whatever potential solutions you may have seen family offices use.
Fair enough. Thanks, John. So really, we all know that what the big issue here is, and as Dawn had alluded to at the very beginning, it's the fact that it's manual, and the impact is predicated on quantity, how many K-1s you receive, quality. Dawn talked about risk, but really it's quality, which comes back to the same thing. If you're not getting the right data or not capturing the proper data off the K-1s, well, yeah, you're at risk. And then how often this stuff comes at the 11th hour, which we know this already. You know it already. It's why you're here today, and why software providers and service providers themselves have been building ever more creative solutions doing this. Although this doesn't directly apply, going back to the largest accounting firms on the planet, when I joined one of them back in 2012 to go redo our tax compliance solution, the obvious most manual process in the entire works was looking at staff, right out of college, sitting there jacked up on caffeine in the 11th hour with binders of paper, keying the stuff into spreadsheets. And we were able to build, and others have done that since then, a solution that when I left that particular Big Four firm, they're using the tool that my guys produce to process 80,000 K-1s a year, saving an average of at least an hour per K-1. So you could get closer to deadline and process them. But I'm going to expand a little bit on what we mean by being manual, because it's not simply grabbing the data. And you all know this better, as well as, all of you know it as well as I or Dawn or John do. The pain points, let's broaden it a little bit. If you have more than 30 or 40 or 50 K1s, and I know from your surveys that many of you do, you need to be able to collect, or if need be, retrieve the needed documents. And too often it's manual, it's on pieces of paper. If you're lucky, it's on a spreadsheet. Log the receipt of those documents, allowing to keep track of which ones you haven't received yet, and which ones are at risk. So going back to Dawn's point, what happens in the 11th hour? What are you going to do about it? The capture of data from them, and we're not talking the face of the K1, that's easy. We're talking about grabbing the footnote data that extends after page 1, grabbing the state data. Now we've got K3s to work with. Manually review the results. Look, technology will get you a lot of the way there, but you still got to put eyes on it. That means somebody who knows their way around a K1. It's just not somebody off the street that you've plugged in to run the software. More importantly, or equally importantly, once you have the data, get it to where you need it, either into a work paper or something that's going to be used to bulk upload into your software, or into the software itself. And it doesn't have to always be technology. I often leverage technology in my work. Jon introduced me as the technology guy, but I'm an operations guy. It's where you have the technology, use it. And again, your need or interest in some of these steps may differ depending on the quantity, quality, timing issues you face in your operation. The good news is, and I'm sort of jumping ahead here a little bit, the technology, over the years, the technology has improved. Now you keep hearing things like AI, artificial intelligence or machine learning. That's not the be all end all that it's cracked up to be, but it helps. And there's software out there that will address the various needs, and we'll discuss when we get to that point that I just addressed just now, or just listed: the collection, the logging, the scanning, the capture to push into downstream. We're all facing the same problems, whether you are a big four firm or a family office. The difference is, are you looking to do this yourselves? Are you looking to have that as a backup to whoever you're providing it to, your tax accountant? There are options, and we'll, time providing, we'll get into those and discuss what's there. Back to you, Jon.
Yeah, well, Gary, let me follow up with you for
Please.
a sec on what you just said. Maybe you could provide us, since you're an operations guy, maybe you can give us like a little workflow, or at a high level, what an efficient K1 process might look like in terms of receiving documents either in the mail, or you got to go out to a website and grab it, or it comes in an email or whatever, all the way through to recording that in some manner, whether it's in a technology itself, you're doing it yourself, or you're creating a file that you're sending along to your accountants to do.
Yep.
That might be
Sure.
instructive to hear sort of the way that the information flows from one end to the other.
So the receipt of the data, and as you said, there are multiple ways it may be sent to you. Back in 2012, the IRS and RevProc 2012-17 said, hey, if the recipient agrees to it, you can email it, or you can send it electronically. And by the way, for years that's been happening. Long before that RevProc, the rule simply was, well, you still got to send it snail mail as well. But in 2012, that changed. So a lot more, and I ended up working or building a solution actually to distribute K1s. And even people who didn't respond and say, yeah, I'll take it electronically. When you get an email that says your K1 is ready, click here if you want to get it electronically. If they didn't do it before, 99.9%, who wouldn't say no? You get your K1 immediately. So the issue becomes, are you having to go reach out to get it? Is it being emailed to you? If it is hard copy, you've got to scan it. But the point is, as they come in, you want to, or whoever's doing this for you, wants to be able to track when you got it, compare it to last year, so that as you're getting closer to crunch time, have the ability to say, hey, I got my K1 from so-and-so last year on May 1st, and it's May 18th. I don't have it yet. Here's the number I've got to go call. You want to have that as part of your operations so that there's now no misunderstanding on, did it go someplace else? Did I miss it? Things like that.
Mhm.
And you want to, you need to keep track of this so you can make the intelligent decision when you get down to deadline. Do you go back to the principal and say, look, I'm missing these 5. What do you want me to do? And this goes back to what Dawn was describing earlier. There is software out there, some better than others. And I've got the whole long list and I've dealt with most of them
Mhm.
that do, look, anybody can grab data off the face of the federal K-1. That's
Mhm.
not rocket science. But delving into the footnotes, whether they be overflow from page 1 or the more esoteric ones or things like that, take some
Mhm.
fairly sophisticated software, which exists. It doesn't
Mhm.
grab everything, but as
Mhm.
I've always said to those who I've built these things for, it gives you a running start. So it gets your hands on that. Now, what does it look like? I'm going to just generically talk, many of them look pretty much the same way. It shows up on a screen that you can look at that says, oh, on the left, this is the fields I need to capture. In the middle, this is what the software thinks it is. And on the right, you can go actually take a look at the actual document. Now, you don't do that to look at every one of these, but you do that for when the software is that sophisticated on most of these, that says, we're only at an 80% confidence that we got the number right. Well, that's what you go look at, or the ones that weren't picked up, things like that. Software exists to be able to do that. Does
Gary,
it
can
make
I ask a
sense?
question?
Yes, please.
I'm curious on that software that you're describing as a Big Four alumni. I know that all the big firms are using that software. Is it something that is available? Is there a version that's available that somebody in a single family office could use?
Yes. And going into, and you're quite right. I'm more familiar with Big Four and some of the other firms that are doing it, where we took just a generic piece of OCR software and made it work. There are some tools now that are out there that are priced appropriately to do that for a single family office. Would I do that if I was getting 30 or 40 K1s a year? Probably not, because at some point it's got to become cost effective here. But you go over that amount, yeah, that type of software does exist. They aren't perfect, but they, like even with the Big Four, for a family office, it will give you a running start on capturing the data. It will I'll be surprised in my lifetime if there's somebody who claims it grabs everything, especially now that the IRS has thrown us a curve with the K3s, as those are even more complex. But the catch up, they're playing catch up in that. So I think, so yes, this is not me simply talking about how, cool it is for Big Four. These are tools, or at least not all, but some of them that purport to do these things. I've only taken a high level look at some of them recently. I need to go deeper on some of it just before I stake my name to it. So they're getting there. There are others that do other pieces. For example, there's software that does a really great job of capturing or bringing in the K1s, but even they haven't gotten into processing them. They're getting the documents in, but not haven't taken the next step, and everybody's wondering whether they're going to get there. And I know this is without naming them right now, these are software firms that family offices are familiar with, because I'm pretty sure that's their sweet spot. So to carry the ball, from where I was talking, once that data is captured, it really should not be that difficult, and it really isn't. It's much easier than the actual capture of data. Is now taking those results that are sitting in a file and dropping them into whatever it is you use, whether it's a work paper, a bulk upload, or some of the software is sophisticated enough that it will push directly into your downstream software system. So those things are out there as well. They're not that hard for somebody who's not very technical to manage. But that's really, it's irrelevant that you've captured the data if you haven't gotten it put or bridged into where you need it. it's irrelevant.
Mhm.
So yes, John, all of
Mhm.
those things exist. Are they perfect? No. Are they better than doing it with hard copy sitting in your lap, trying to, or copy and paste an electronic piece into a spreadsheet? Yeah, they're better. Depends on the situation of each family office, whether it's cost effective and necessary.
Yeah, right. I think that you mentioned volume as a key element in this whole discussion,
Well, it's
as did
volume
Don.
and
Yeah,
timeliness and
yeah.
risk.
And Phil, I think, sent out some questions to the group, and maybe some of the folks on this call may have answered some of those questions in the survey around K-1L. But most seem to indicate that they were using spreadsheets to capture info. And I
And the
had a
pain points
conversation.
and the pain points they mentioned were,
Yeah,
besides simply being manual, tracking receipt of K-1s, tax basis tracking, reporting and analytics, and bridging the data into the downstream application. It's nice if you got the data, but if you can't get it where it needs to be, you're only halfway
yeah,
there.
yeah. I mean, Excel is never going away. It's always going to be in the toolkit. No question about that. In fact, I talked to one tax director in a very large, multi-billion-dollar single-family office who said that with regard to automating the process, he had engaged with some accounting firm to do their darndest to automate the workflow from capture to creating a file, a dump of that information. Said it, really didn't work successfully. And in fact, he said to me, he said, I really like the fact that I have my team manually going through these K-1s and manually keying stuff into spreadsheets for a manual review by by us. He said, it just feels more intimate to me. And I said, well, you got hundreds of those things. And he said, yeah, I know, but it just feels like I feel like I know what I've got as opposed to relying upon. And I said, well, don't you spend a lot of time? Isn't that a pain point? He says, yes, it's a pain, but it's a good kind of pain. I don't know. So I guess it just depends on, where you're at, what's important to you. And maybe we can shift gears a little bit now. And Don, let me go back to you for a sec and talk about, based upon, all the experience that you've had working with clients on one side of the table, now you're on the other side of the table in a family office and overseeing most certainly the tax function. What do you, for now that you're on this side of the table, what do you see that really could be described as an unmet need? Something that, not just a current pain point, but something that, like, if you were really thinking far out into the future, like, this would be awesome to have this capability or this feature either in a software or just generally speaking. Any thoughts on that, on an unmet need?
Oh, John, so many thoughts. Yeah,
That's why I hit that one right out the center field, didn't I?
yeah, right. I don't even need a big glove for that. So I guess, one of the things that I key in on when I'm listening to Gary is that the technology that we currently have in the ecosystem that's out there in the world right now, as far as I'm aware anyway, and I'm admittedly not a tech person, so but is the ability to scrape data from the face of the K-1 is definitely there. How well it is scraped or how well it's interpreted from what the scrape captures is, I think, not uniform across all platforms. Fair statement. Gary's nodding, so I get it.
Fair statement. Well, fair statement because,
okay.
yeah.
So
Fair.
I think I sympathize, John, with the client that you described who said, I still like that human touch
Mhm.
on the information that's coming in, and however you define that, is
Mhm.
going to be different for everybody, but touching the info as it's coming in, because I am a big proponent of using software that works well. And I know that there's a couple of folks on the phone who I've actually described to them my opinion that, you can use a bot to go into your email and capture your K-1s as they're coming in the door. And
Mhm.
that bot can take those K-1s and put them into a particular location, or they can shoot them off to your accountant. And you don't have to have a person who sits there and opens their email. Oh, wait, I got to get a cup of coffee. Then I'm going to go in my email. And then I'm going to
Mhm.
go look and see if K-1s came in the door. Then I'm going to put them all in a PDF. Then I'm going to send them off to so there are things that do things like that. But what I don't like, John, and what I wish could be fixed is everything that's behind the face of the K-1 has to be touched by human beings. Full stop.
Mhm.
Um, one of my, as we've talked about, one of my big bugaboos is the foreign filings, because
Yeah.
they're
Mhm.
very hard to manage in any sort of an automated way. And although I will say, interesting, the world is constantly changing. That case recently came out because one of my big fears with the foreign filings, getting them wrong, is that you're open to penalties. And possibly losing your statute of limitations. But the case that came out not too long ago that says that the IRS is limited in their ability to assess penalties for failure to file foreign forms. I am sure that they will be fighting back on that. But for the moment, that's an interesting development in the space, I'll put it that way. But what I would really love to see, to go back to actually answer your question, what I'd really love to see is if there was some way to either transmit the information from the K-1 provider in a way that doesn't require someone else to receive it and read it and key in. So if it came in like a format that was different than a PDF, more interactive maybe. Or another solution, I guess, whatever the solution would be, that would
Mhm.
solve that pain point of all the pages behind page 1.
Mm. And that may be a failing that some offices have, right? They may fail to look beyond page 1, and there's a lot of important information there, and all that unstructured data. And Jack Gallagher just pointed out, he said so much gets reported on line 11, other income. And
Yep.
usually that's replete with extra statements and or footnotes to describe those items, and it's really hard to automate that info. So that would be,
People stuff.
if we could meet that need, that would be, yeah.
Tons of stuff gets stuffed
Yeah.
into line 11. There's a lot of info in there, sometimes depending on who's doing the K-1, with respect to all different kinds of pluses and minuses to taxable income that are you can't ignore. You can't ignore them. There's, you can't just look at what it says on the face of the return for line 11, certainly, and especially if it's just an asterisk.
Yeah. So easy to say, let's automate everything. Hard to
Yeah.
do, right? Very, very difficult to do.
Well, impossible at the moment, right?
All right, impossible at the moment. Good, thank you. That is really a true statement. And Gary, how would you take what you've heard Dawn talk about in terms of unmet needs and vision, right? What she'd love to have, and cast it in in your frame of experience working with family offices and from an operational standpoint.
Well, again, some of the solutions, the earlier solutions, the ones I've cut my teeth on when I first started playing with K-1s, a dozen or so years ago,
Mm-hmm.
was you had fairly, well, it's gotten more sophisticated, but relatively sophisticated optical scanning that would capture the data. But you had to have tech savvy people telling it what data to capture, how to reconcile, for example, going to Jack's point, what appears on line 11 on the face of the K-1 against the extension or overflow, if you will, into line 11 footnotes that follow.
Mhm.
A lot of that is there, and these things were first of all, a proper solution requires several things. Yes, you need the technology to go, whether you call it scraping or whatever the latest new phrase is, capturing the data off of those PDF forms, the electronic versions of the K-1. But you also need somebody with tax savvy to review it. This is, there will be a firm that remains nameless that said, hey, we're going to go hire a bunch of kids to run our software because the software is going to run itself. And no, you're not. Let's just say that there were certain partners in that firm that said, we're still going to review it ourselves because we're not relying on a kid who has no background in tax to run the software and tell us what our K-1s have. You need somebody on the other end, whether it's in the family office space, for those of you who are on the call and looking to capture the data yourselves, there is technology that will give you that running start that I talked about earlier. But you still need somebody who knows their way around tax, knows their way around a K-1 to just put eyes on it. You don't have to check every number, because really the capture of the data from the face of the K-1 is pretty straightforward. Where the software itself says, we're not sure about this item, believe them, and check it. And there will be certain footnotes that are just so complex or done so many different ways. I know one of the questions that we had, talked about for this call is, well, what's the industry doing about it? Well, as long as the industry insists on having their own custom footnotes, they aren't going to match up. You've got to be able to, I'm not saying this to pick on anybody in particular, but EY does it different than Deloitte, that does that footnote different from KPMG and so forth. So you need sophisticated software that recognizes all of those things without having somebody having to go say, well, this one had a hyphen between short and term and the other one didn't have a hyphen, and now I got to go figure it out myself. Software's gotten smarter for things like that. So,
Mhm.
where Jack had talked about, and I've responded to it in the chat as well, about line 11, at least on some of the better software, that's been solved. All of the software, I haven't looked at everything in that level of detail. But I think we're getting there, so that if a family office wants to do it, there's software out there that they can leverage to do so, and the prices are coming down. Because technology always, the numbers come down as time goes on. And newer things are out there, or more sophisticated things. So there are options. Are they perfect? No. Do they mean you don't have to double check the numbers? Hell no. It's what is it? I don't say this to be political, but the old saying from a certain president many years ago: trust but verify.
Well, maybe, I know we're getting close to the end of our time, but I think that the wave of the future, where I think we're going, is that as much in the way that the changes to or the advent of the K2, K3 forms and rules are enforcing uniformity in the way that we're reporting foreign tax credit information. Okay. I think that's actually where we're going with the rest of the K-1, because the government wants a lot, I was going to say a little more clarity. They want a lot more clarity about information that's coming through K-1. By the way, large business and international campaign reviewing all basis questions, which is another area that these K-1s really feed into. So I think that's where we are headed, is a a wave of future enforcement that will enforce conformity, Gary, in the way that K-1s are prepared. So that's where I'm going to leave my last comment about
Yeah, I mean,
where I think
to
we're
fo-
headed.
yeah, to follow along on that, Dawn, I think that, we all realize that the K-1 is just not as organized as a W-2. And wouldn't it be great if
Right.
if everybody, like Gary mentioned, everybody followed the same format, the information all came in the same way.
Never happened voluntarily, but I think
Yeah,
government,
and
if the government enforces it on the way, the reason why a W-2 works is there's only 12 boxes or whatever it is to fill
Yeah,
out. And those
that's right.
boxes can only be filled out in a certain way. If a K-1 worked that way, then everybody would be forced into conformity. So,
Well, people on the call, please note in the chat if you know otherwise, but I don't believe that there's any industry group, whether it's private equity industry group or hedge fund industry group or registered investment advisor industry group or wealth management industry group, that is fighting this fight or has taken on this challenge
no.
to encourage some sort of unified or consistent treatment of the information in the K-1. Does anybody know? I mean, I did a little research for this call to see if I can find something.
There's probably an AICPA work group probably out there, because they tend to, when the IRS asks for comments and so forth. So there are work groups that within the AICPA. So I would imagine that's probably where something like that would sit, but I don't think that there's an appetite on the part of the large firms to enforce conformity, because it even internally there's disagreement about what a K-1 footnote should say. So there's not a kumbaya moment happening yet.
Right.
There is actually,
And every attorney is going to write the same note with exactly the same information, a different way, right?
Right.
Well, I'm sorry, chat GPT, the AI is going to fix this whole thing, isn't it?
Well, in the couple of minutes that we've got left, and Phil, I don't know if we're at the top of the hour, and I hope we can continue on for another couple of minutes. I would like to talk about technology, and there are some firms out there that are focused on this problem. And Phil, I see you appeared there on the screen. Is it okay if we carry on for another couple
keep
minutes?
on going. I think people should definitely turn in chat if they want to ask specific questions, but you can keep on going. You have another 15, 20 minutes. Okay.
Oh, we do. Oh, okay. All right. Well, gosh, that's an eternity. So I'd like to maybe turn a little bit and just talk about technology, because I know Gary said, AI and machine learning is not the be all end all. And I think Dawn said, I don't want to say sarcastically, but she said, Chat GPT is going to solve all our problems. And I think both of those points of view are correct at the current moment. Having said that, I think there are some firms who are using artificial intelligence to work on resolving this problem. And, one is Thomson Reuters, I know that. And Gary, I think you may have had some experience with Thomson.
over the years and more recently as well. Yes, and
yeah,
I'm familiar with, I've evaluated their K-1 analyzer tool.
What can you tell us about that? That would be, in a nutshell, that would be helpful for the group.
Sure. I mean, it's done, like with every one of these products, the first year or two, it was nothing to write home about. And it's been out there for several years. Every year it grows in functionality. There's now direct integration, and realize we're talking, it's Thomson Reuters, so no surprise that it offers direct integration into GoSystem, into one source trust tax and one source income tax, and supposedly even links into their competitor CCH Access. So they have a tool out there, and in fact, we can't get into the detail, but when we were talking about creating a firm I worked with that was talking about creating our own tool, and it was a family office that said, well, we want to run it ourselves. and I recognized that they were using Thomson Reuters. I said, well, let's set you up on that because that's what makes the most sense. So there, Thomson Reuters does offer a tool. Is it perfect? No. Does it get you, again, give you that running start? It does. And there are others similar like it. I mean, CCH, no surprise. Thomson Reuters did it, so CCH got on the bandwagon, and they've developed something. I haven't seen that one directly yet. There are several others that are out there that are worthy of looking at. And realize I'm naming these. That's not me endorsing them. That's saying, they may,
No, and I think, well,
they
let
may
me
make
just-
sense. Yeah, they may
Yeah,
make
let me
sense
just-
for you to look at. Go ahead, John.
Let me just jump in because we're naming some names here, but we're not getting paid by any of these guys. We have no relationship with any of them. We're not making any money on this. So I don't want you to think there's any conflict. There is none. What we are doing is trying to share some information that we gathered in preparation for this webinar. So as Gary said,
I'd like to ask one question, okay?
go ahead.
What about moving information from a K-1 directly to a 1040 or a 1041 or another partnership return? What is that should be pretty simple for an internal investment partnership.
It should indeed. And
But still, it's not.
well, again, I'd be curious to see. But it
ain't.
In fairness, I'd be
Right.
curious to see what if both those locators are within, Thomson Reuters, whether it's GoSystem or OneSource or whatever. It appears to, their claim anyway, and I haven't vetted it yet, is that we'll not only capture the data from the K-1 and put it where it's supposed to be, but can go push it into OneSource income tax. So that's the claim they're making. I haven't seen it for myself yet. So it's unverified in my eyes at this point, or how smooth that is. Now, going to something that Dawn had said several minutes ago about, it should be easy, especially if we're talking about multi-tier, your own family office, multi-tier partnerships. It is possible, and it won't work when you're crossing one firm to another because they all do it differently. But let's just say that I've seen it has been more of a risk and approvals setting that where a given firm would say, hey, we have this, we're doing this K-1, and the investors in that K-1 we're also doing, and we should be able to just take the technical file or take the data file and move it. It's been investigated, at least with the firms that I'm familiar with, and nobody has had the, for lack of a more politically correct term, the guts to just to try to make that work because of the approvals were more complex than the actual technology to make that happen. Doing it cross firm, which is really where Dawn was headed with that comment. Yeah. If you guys can't even agree on what the form of a footnote looks like, I just don't see that happening. Everybody's got their own way. And because they accommodate their clients who say, or their lawyers of their clients who say, well, that's the way the footnote has to be. And if it differs from the standard or whatever, that's going to always make a mess of things. Or no, make it more complex. Let's be politically correct with that.
All right. Well, I've got something to add to this conversation about technology. I was looking around and I found a solution that was really impressive to me, that appeared to be relatively new. And I'll put the link in chat, but I'll just say it right now for those of you who are interested in jumping on and taking a look at it right now. And it's a firm called K-1 X.io. And they are using AI and machine learning to gather up the information off of the K-1s and are working in collaboration with another tech firm called Arch Labs, and that's archlabs.com to organize the information. So pretty cool looking solution. I'm not sure how much it costs, and it may be unbelievably expensive, who knows, but it may be priced right because they do mention on their website that it's for family offices. So it might be something if people are interested in exploring that after you've taken a look at their site. I'd love to hear back from anybody who takes the time to do that. I'd love to get, I know Gary and Don would too, and Phil, and you can write back to Phil and he'll forward it on to us. That'd be just fine. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this solution because it seems pretty darn comprehensive to me and pretty awesome and awe-inspiring anyway. And I think what I'd like to do is maybe just close out our session here today with a big thank you to all of you for hanging in there with us well over an hour. We appreciate it. And also ask you if you have any questions for us that you'd like to pose to us now via chat. We've got about five minutes left or 6 minutes left till the quarter after. So if you do have a question for Gary or for Don or even for me, please post it in the chat. And I'll give you 1 minute to do that. And if we don't hear from anybody, we'll say thank you very much. And Phil, we'll turn it back to you.
Sure. So thank you, everyone. I really appreciate everyone that responded to the survey. The survey was very helpful in us putting together the program. I also want to thank Jon for the idea. It's great. And also Gary and Dawn for really shedding some light on a very, very obscure area that we are obviously very interested in based on the number of people that replied to the survey, as well as those that were on the school. So we probably will have a follow-up in some way, shape, or form and information about what we learned. We may share some highlights from the survey and turn out another survey. This is a constantly changing area. And again, great job, fabulous panel.
Well, thanks, Phil, for having us. And if everybody hadn't seen the chat, there are a couple of really good comments in the chat right now about the two products we were just talking about, the Thomson Reuters and the K-1X, which Janet mentioned may be the same. They may be the same thing as one may be a subsidiary of the other.
Well,
sure.
John, they use the same name, by the way, which is probably
Okay.
where Janet's getting this from. After you mentioned,
Okay.
well, I've heard about K-1X, looked it up, and they were using the same name, and that sort of had me scratching my head.
Okay. Well, anyway, for further research, and Phil, thank you again. Don, thank you so much. And Gary, thank you. And everyone on the call, really appreciate you taking time to spend with us today.
And I'm hoping that many of you join us on July 11th, where Jon and Gary are going to be there, answer some questions. Maybe Jon will fly in. Who knows? Never know.
Yeah, I'm waiting for that first class ticket, Phil, from Lisbon, LIS to JFK and a return. Yeah, and I'll be there.
And again, thank you, everyone.
All right.
Next program is June 29th, Keeping the Family in the Single Family Office. Hope to see you then.